What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the season premiere of Creature Commandos. The first two episodes dropped this morning on Max. And this is more than just your typical little animated show that you can kind of review in isolation, because this is the first of James Gunn's projects now that he is running DC Studios. He wrote every single episode of this show. I think it's going to run through early January. But I think it's the first indication of what we can expect from James Gunn and the DC Universe moving forward. It's got the new logo for the studio, but the old logo from the comics. It's the logo that I grew up with. And I don't know if there's ever been more pressure placed on a writer-director than what we're seeing right now with James Gunn, because Warner Brothers is $50 billion in debt. Warner Brothers desperately needs their DC universe to be thriving and firing on all cylinders, cranking out hit shows, hit movies, etc. And they've basically placed all their eggs in a James Gunn-shaped basket saying, save us, save the DC universe. And so we're seeing, I don't know, you could call it a rebranding or a pivot or a reboot, however you want to describe it. But this is James Gunn's world for the foreseeable future. And I guess I'll close this video with some more predictions about his Superman movie and season 2 of Peacemaker. And I mean, goddamn, he's going to be very busy for the foreseeable future. But let's focus for the time being on Creature Commandos, what I thought, what it is, etc., and so forth. So let's start with the basics. I liked it. I didn't love it. But admittedly, I probably went into it with very lofty expectations, because when it comes to James Gunn, I mean, I've been following his career pretty closely for 20 years, ever since he wrote the screenplay for Dawn of the Dead for Zack Snyder back in the early 2000s. But the Suicide Squad, which I think came out, in 2021? That's probably my favorite superhero movie and or show of the last 5 years. That first weekend when it came out, I think I saw it 3 times that first weekend. It's just delightful, and I think it's criminally underrated. I think it's criminally underseen. And obviously, everybody wants different things from the superhero genre. It's a big, wide, crazy marketplace where everybody wants their particular needs to be satisfied. But when it comes to a great adaptation of obscure characters with shitloads of hilarious sex and violence and that sort of thing, I thought it was fantastic and it had unexpected heart. But yeah, I just thought the Suicide Squad was an absolute home run and deserves to be recognized as the best goddamn superhero movie of the last half decade. So in that, Creature Commandos is an extension of that and begins 2 years after the Suicide Squad with the father of Flag. We're now following the character of Rick Flag Sr., played by Frank Grillo. But I went into this show hoping it would be the animated equivalent of the Suicide Squad, and on that front, I think it comes up short. I think it's got some good characters. It's got some good violence. It's got some good sexual innuendo and partial nudity and that sort of thing. I don't think the animation style is up to snuff. I feel like it's got great writing, great music, great voice acting, but the animation just feels like you're kind of everyday, run-of-the-mill animated show for kids. And I'm like, you either probably should have done like a great graphic novel with the exact same script, like just do like 7 issues instead of 7 episodes. I think it's going to be 7 episodes. Yep, 7 episodes. But I feel like you either could have done a great graphic novel or done like a really cool animated feature film. These are very short episodes. I feel like there's probably roughly the same amount of material as would go into a great feature film. So it's like either go big or go home. But here's the premise as written on Wikipedia. Following the events of the first season of Peacemaker 2022, Amanda Waller is no longer able to put human lives in jeopardy for her clandestine operations as she did with the Suicide Squad and Team Peacemaker. Instead, she reassembles a Black Ops team of monsters called the Creature Commandos, led by General Rick Flag Sr. And obviously you can call them Task Force X, you can call them the Creature Commandos, call them the Suicide Squad, but the premise is more or less the same. You take people who are in prison, send them on a mission, and if they disobey you, you either shock them or blow their heads off. And if they succeed at the mission, well, then maybe they can take a few years off their sentence. And I should also acknowledge that I liked but didn't love Peacemaker. I think Peacemaker and Creature Commandos have a similar problem where James Gunn's trying to soften these characters to a degree where I feel like if you're going to do the Suicide Squad or Task Force X or Creature Commandos, let them be fucking psychos. Like, my biggest grievance by far against Peacemaker was that they tried to turn him into like a sweet and cuddly good guy, whereas if you watch him in the first movie, he talks about like how he's willing to kill women and children in order to accomplish peace. I mean, I can't remember the exact line, but like,
nothing like a bloodbath to start the day.
They call you Peacemaker.
I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I need to kill to get it.
Peacemaker was a fucking psychopath. And that fight scene between him and Flag and the Suicide Squad, I thought was the emotional peak of the movie. It was so goddamn hardcore. And then as the show started to unfold, I was like, wait a second, you're betraying the character. And obviously characters can evolve, they can have arcs, but let them remain true to who they are. And with Creature Commandos, as of yet, none of these characters has really emerged as like a real vicious, bloody psychopath. I mean, they refer to Weasel eating a bunch of children, but we don't see it. But like G.I. Robot, he's from World War II. He used to fight the Nazis and that sort of thing. Like he is, for all intents and purposes, a good guy. Or Rick Flag Sr., he's a good guy. He's the father of Rick Flag Jr., and he's more or less the exact same character, just a little bit older. Or Zoe Chow as Nina Mazursky, who's basically just an amphibious creature who seems like, I don't know how she ended up in jail in the first place, but just an amphibious scientist. She's kind of nice. Like the only real villain in this story so far is one that was horribly neglected by the premiere. Cersei's ostensibly the main villain of the first 2 episodes, but she's barely even in the show. The feature attraction of the show is the bride, and the bride is portrayed by, hang on one sec, Indira Varma, who people will remember as Ilaria Sand from Game of Thrones. But the bride is basically the DC Comics version of the Bride of Frankenstein, and she's by far the most interesting character of the show so far. But the main mission, or the first mission that the Creature Commandos are being sent on, is very close to where she was created initially by Frankenstein. And one of the kind of side villains or side plots for this for these first 2 episodes is the fact that the original Frankenstein's monster is still hoping to marry her. He's still in love with her. He's a murderous sociopath, and he's voiced by David Harbour, but he's hunting her down. But basically, the first 2 episodes are all about kind of setting up the mission, but at the same time sending her off on a kind of a flashback origin story where we get to see how she became who she is and the degree to which she might be open to the idea of marrying Frankenstein's monster. And spoiler alert, not at all. Oh, and I forgot to mention Dr. Phosphorus. He's also in the mix. Dr. Phosphorus is a classic DC villain. I first encountered him in the pages of James Robinson's Starman, which was one of my all-time favorite comics from the late 90s and early 2000s. But Dr. Phosphorus was fucking awesome back then. And he is played here by, actually, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. For me, he'll always be Wash from Firefly, but it's Alan Ray Tudyk. Anyway, you know the actor. But I think my main reservation about these first 2 episodes is how it does almost no work at all in setting up Cersei and her followers as a compelling villain for this season. She's trying to make a stab at taking over Themyscira, and she's put together this army of minions who are just incompetents and losers. And like the very first line of the show is basically portraying them as like internet trolls, the kind of people that James Gunn has had a few dust-ups with online. I'm like, James Gunn, you're about to try to rebuild the entire DC universe. Maybe don't use your first show in this brand new kind of rebranded DC world. Don't use your first scene as a way of kind of taking a stab at some of your enemies online, because if you want the DC universe to be successful moving forward, if you want your Superman movie to be a huge $1 billion success next year, you're going to want every single nerd on planet Earth to go see it with a big giant smile on their face, whether they've talked trash to you online in the past or not. And it just seems like he's getting off on the wrong foot by kind of picking a petty fight. A filmmaker who's been as wildly successful as James Gunn has. I mean, think about all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, the Suicide Squad, and then kind of his more niche movies like Super and Slither and things like that. Like, he has absolutely won the pop culture lottery. He's enjoyed incredible success. At this point, he should be above petty little bullshit or online bullshit. Like, focus on great shows and great movies and turning DC back into just like an absolute juggernaut, and let the nerds argue amongst themselves. Like, who fucking cares? But it just shows how some of the online discourse does get to them. But his brief little bit of cultural commentary ultimately is self-defeating, because these are the villains of the season, and if they're not portrayed in a completely, totally badass light, well then they're less of a threat. The Creature Commandos will only seem like total badasses themselves if they're defeating really powerful villains. And if they're fighting a bunch of losers, well then, yeah, like, who cares if they beat them? And Cersei, once again, she's a classic character. She's been around for many, many years. I mean, obviously, she goes back to the days of Greek mythology, thousands of years ago. And we get a brief little snippet of her in action fighting the bride, but once again, it's kind of almost too little too late. I just feel like the first 2 episodes really should have gone all in and showing just how badass she is, just how threatening her followers are, so that we feel like when the Creature Commandos arrive in this environment, well then they've got the work cut out for them. But as far as the things that I like are concerned, I do like the fact that the show has an adult sensibility. There are not one, not two, but three different sexual encounters over the course of these first two episodes where I wouldn't say it's like animated porn. I mean, I don't object to animated porn, but it's definitely more adult than your typical 7-year-old child is accustomed to. Like, it's like, nudity in profile or like suggested sexuality and that sort of thing, but still pretty racy for the DC universe, much more so than the live action movies we've been seeing, going back to basically the days of Man of Steel, where where the previous DC universe really got up and running. And not to offer any spoilers, but one of those sexual encounters adds an additional wrinkle to the Frankenstein mythos that I found to be kind of interesting. I mean, once again, this is not Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is DC Universe's Frankenstein, and they can screw around with the character however they like. But I was definitely caught off guard by just how kind of balls to the wall the origin story was for the bride. And I think, her origin story and those flashbacks are the best that the show has had to offer so far. But also, I like the music. I mean, maybe the music's a little one note. They're using the style and tone of Gogol Bordello to kind of, I guess, serve as like the main creative direction for the music. I think they only actually use one official track by Gogol Bordello in the show. But I'm reading here on Wikipedia, it says that Kevin Kiner and Clint Mansell were composing the score. The pair previously scored the first season of Peacemaker. Creature Commandos' theme song is Moliendo Cafe from Venezuelan artist Hugo Blanco. When developing this series, Gunn created a musical mood board inspired by the works of Gogol Bordello and the Dresden Dolls. I've seen Gogol Bordello perform live. I saw them at some bar in, I think in Los Feliz or Silver Lake in LA, 20 years ago. Those guys can fucking shred. I mean, when it comes to live performance and just basically blasting the roof off of a small bar with violins and crazy shit. I mean, it's basically punk and Ukrainian classical music colliding. It's a very Lower East Side Manhattan sound, but goddamn, they were incredible. So I like that music, but it might get a little old if you just have that same style and tone throughout the entire 7 episodes. But who knows? James Gunn obviously is very famous for his needle drops. In any case, even if I was a little ambivalent about these first 2 episodes, I already saw the first episode twice, and I'm sure I'll watch the second episode as soon as I'm done uploading this video. But James Gunn at this point is one of the last remaining storytellers in the superhero genre that I actually get excited about. I mean, the 3 Guardians movies, we can debate which ones are the best. I think the first one's the best, but that was an incredible trilogy within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Suicide Squad kicked ass, and he's done great work in video games and obviously great work in independent films and working in the early days of Troma Video back in the 1990s. I mean, he's a total maniac. He is prolific as hell. He cranks out a lot of stories. Not all of them are created equal, but he, like I said, he's one of the only guys left in the superhero genre where I'm like, fuck yeah, I will see any show or movie that he does within the superhero genre. And I'm trying to think, who are the other people that are left within the superhero genre that I would get equally excited about? Matt Reeves, I'm very curious to see what he does with his next Batman movie, and obviously I was very impressed by his season of The Penguin. He wasn't really closely involved with The Penguin as a writer or producer, but he was involved as an executive producer. But it's interesting seeing how Matt Reeves, who's also one of the most talented people still working in the superhero genre, is kind of in a weird way like a rival or a competitor with James Gunn underneath the same umbrella. It remains to be seen how they're going to navigate these waters of allowing Matt Reeves to have his own Batman universe that is outside of the James Gunn DC universe, because obviously Batman's an important character. Newsflash, Batman's a key component to the DC universe. The DC universe is basically Batman and Superman. And obviously we can all have a million other favorite characters with all these incredible comics and all these incredible arcs, but when it comes to the marketability of the DC brand, it's Batman and fucking Superman. And you can go anywhere on the planet, even if they've never seen a movie, show them those logos, I'm like, oh, Batman, Superman. They're very recognizable IP. So at some point, James Gunn will have to let Batman off the bench and into his universe. But whether or not that'll be an extension of Matt Reeves' universe that he's creating or a rival Batman character, I feel like we've had too many people play Batman in recent years. Let's just have one Batman and one Joker and one Harley Quinn and so on and so forth. I feel like there's been a lot of brand confusion. There's been a lot of splintering and fracturing of the DC audience, and I feel like they just need to get the whole goddamn universe all marching in lockstep in the same goddamn direction. And so we'll see what James Gunn does. But obviously, James Gunn and Matt Reeves, very talented filmmakers, and I'll be excited to see what they do with these characters moving forward, because at a time where the superhero genre has lost its bloom and it seems to be in a period of decline, where we've got more failures than successes to point to, can James Gunn turn the DC brand around, or will it just be a series of diminishing returns? But no one would be more happy than I if he delivers a world-class Superman movie next year. It could potentially be one of the biggest movies of 2025. So in closing, I'll simply say I am cautiously optimistic about Creature Commandos. I will continue to watch it. Whether or not I continue to make videos about it will depend upon how good it is. And yeah, if the show's fucking incredible, then I will come back and I will apologize for all my reservations and say, all right, yeah, they managed to stick the landing and all 7 episodes were fantastic. But once again, I feel like instead of making 7 episodes, they should have just made one kick-ass animated feature, whether that's for Max or for the theater, or hell, make a goddamn live action. But I just like the Suicide Squad so much. I just want to see more of that world, but I have a feeling that's going to be kind of a one and done scenario. But if you have not watched the Suicide Squad in a couple of years, or you kind of have dismissed it prematurely, go back and watch it again. I think you'll be blown away by just how well that movie holds up. It's exactly what I want from the superhero genre. Also, one last thing while I'm on the subject of animation, I wanted to offer a deep tease. I recently got hired to do a few commentary tracks for a few animated movies for their upcoming Blu-ray releases. I cannot yet say what those movies are. All I can say is that they are classic animated movies that helped me fall in love with animation. And, you know, I'm an animation freak. I've dabbled in the world of animation as a producer. I've worked with Bill Plimpton a few times as a producer, but more to come on that. And when I can promote the trailers and the release, I'll include the trailers and the links, and definitely I'll be plugging and promoting like a madman on this channel. But I just recorded those commentary tracks over the last few weeks. Very excited, and it's leading to more commentary tracks in the future. I know not everybody's into buying Blu-rays, but if you like physical media and Blu-rays, it's very exciting for me to be doing commentary tracks for classic movies, especially in the world of animation. But more to come on that in the next month or two. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, all that good stuff. And I'll be back at y'all either tomorrow or Saturday with my first impressions video of Path of Exile 2, which I think drops New York time at 2 p.m. tomorrow. And I'm going to be playing that video game like a madman. But thanks again for watching. I greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.